What's the number two problem that I hear the most from sales reps? Is that people won't engage with me, won't call me back, won't respond to my emails, my voicemails, or pick up my calls. Why is that? Well, I think we know why it is. It's mostly because they don't want or need something. So if they don't want or need something, then we have to bring them something or be enjoyable to talk to. Now, a lot of people say, oh, likability isn't needed in sales if you've got such a valuable offering. And that might be true in certain cases, under certain situations. When you go to the emergency room, you don't have to like the doctor that's saving your life. You don't have to agree with their politics, their religion, or their ethnic background. All you care about is save my life. But in business sales, we're not in that desperation. We have many choices and many things that we can do with our time. So being likable and bridging that gap from unknown to known is critical. And this goes to my mammal to mammal selling, M to M. I did an episode last week about it, and I'm going to kind of build off of it because it gets us to think the way we should. Because the logical stuff is helpful. It's part of the sale. You can't ignore it. But we also have to understand why people are going to buy. Why are they going to talk to us? They're going to talk to us because they either need or want something, or they enjoy talking to us. And one of those ways is to apply humor. And you're like, oh, Brian, I'm not as gregarious and humorous as you. I understand. I'm going to help you with that. Trust me. The guest today, you're gonna enjoy it because you're gonna be like, how'd this guy become humorous? Nerdy. We have a similar background. You know, I kind of used humor as a kid to distract from from situations. And today I use it as a way of engaging with salespeople to cut through the kind of the religious, political type of sales, you know, where, oh, it's not that, it's this, or all that matters is that. And if you don't do this, it doesn't work. And anyone who says that doesn't understand sales. I got burnt on that stuff. So what I try to do now is tell an approach with humor. Make it funny, make it more interesting and engaging. And people like it, and there's less that hate it. So I try and use it that way. I try and use it on the podcast as a way of engaging the audience, to lighten it up. And because sales, it is more than a bunch of tactics. I know everybody wants the silver bullet, and I keep trying to tell you, you are it. It is not a single tactic. It's the aggregate of all of those skills, like it is in any other performance profession, whether it be athletics, cooking, music, comedy. It's all an aggregate of these skills. Now, today we're going to take a different way of looking at humor, meaning that you don't have to be humorous. You can present something that is humorous, a funny picture. And we're going to show you how to start with a simple smile and how to disarm people with it. After the interview, I'll give you a couple of stories of what's worked for me and what I've seen work for others, and how even if you're the driest engineer in the world, how you can use humor as a way of breaking the ice. Imagine all those presentations, all those initial introductions that you have, cold calls, cold emails, demos. They're all kind of standoffish at first. But as soon as people start to laugh, they start to open up. You start to align on a common theme of what is funny, poking fun at yourself or the situations, exaggerating it a little bit. And we're going to give you plenty of examples in the interview. Let's get into it. Before we do, one way to show how humorous you can be in that big smile is with video emails. Co-video is a simple, easy way to do it. Has a browser extension. Just hit it, turn on the camera on your computer and put that big smile, it breaks the ice. It cuts through the noise. It enables you to connect with people very fast. Compare that to text. It's hard to be humorous in just a text. You can attach a GIF and everything. And that part it can be cute and adorable and everything. But if it's you putting on a big smile, don't have to tell a joke. Just, be a little gregarious. Sometimes even acting funny. I mean, look at Kevin Hart. Now, I like Kevin Hart. I watch his movies. But if you just listen to the transcript of his jokes, they're okay, I guess. But if you see him present the jokes, he puts humor into it. He's very gregarious. You can't help but smile and laugh when you watch him present his humor. And so you got to start thinking this way and not thinking like, oh, I'm just not a funny person. And let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. Here we go. Hey, Drew, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be chatting with you. And by way of background, I guess maybe the most important thing to know about me is that I am a nerd. And if you are wondering, if the listeners are wondering what type of nerd, the answer is yes. Right? Computer science, sci-fi, Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, Star Trek, Starbucks, all of them. Yeah. But most specifically, I'm an engineer. As a kid, I used to like to take things apart and put them back together again, things like clocks and radios, and my parents' marriage, which never really got that one back together. But and so I've always been an engineering-minded person. So I went to the Ohio State University, got a degree in computer science and engineering, and started working at Procter & Gamble as an IT project manager before going off and doing this humor thing.
Which was the obvious next step, right?
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, people hear that, when I speak or talk about the value of humor and they ask the background, they're like, engineer, like, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? But in a way, for me, humor was how I could be effective with people, right? Because I was always really good with computers because you can be efficient with computers. You don't need to motivate a computer to work. You don't have to convince it to turn on. But, trying to motivate people to actually listen to what you're going to say or take action based on what you recommend, that's a lot harder to do. And it turns out that for me, humor was a great strategy for getting that to happen.
And was that your whole life, or was it something that kind of just evolved in college, or?
Yeah, no, it was much later. So I was very much kind of the academic nerd. I was voted teacher's pet my senior year. And then in college, I started doing improv and stand-up, and it was at P&G where I started to realize that, just as important, if maybe not more important than the technical skills that I had learned, it was what I had learned in improv and stand-up as a way to engage people. So it was really kind of post-college. In fact, I started doing improv and stand-up more. I've done over 1,000 shows, and when I went to my high school reunion not too long ago, people found out that I did comedy, and they're like, but you're not funny.
Yeah.
Right? So it's very much an evolution.
What I like about that is clearly it was not an innate skill in you. It was a learned skill. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And that I think is, a big belief of mine and is a starting point for a lot of what we talk about is most people, like you said, think it's innate, that you're just born funny or not. But like most skills, it's one that you can learn, you can pick up on. There's, certainly an art and science to humor. We can teach some of the science piece, and then there is an art to it, but that comes with, practice and repetition.
And that's what sales is, because I always use comedy as an analogy to sales, where in comedy there's probably, 100 to 500 comedy writers for every successful comedian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of background behind it of people helping. That's why SNL has, a writer's room, or any of the late show hosts have it, or even, kind of another analogous thing is that comedians are constantly tweaking and refining, just as you are in sales. It's not just I'm going to write one sales pitch and then now it's perfect forever and I never change it, but you constantly iterate on it. You're constantly tweaking to say, in comedy, it's okay, if I pause a little bit longer, do I get a better laugh? Or if I tweak this joke in that way? So it's very much an iterative approach, and I think there's a lot of overlap between the two.
And why is comedy so powerful? or humor is so powerful?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think one way to answer that is to ask you a very dumb question, but still want you to answer. And the dumb question is, would you rather do something that is fun or not fun?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a dumb
clearly.
question, but yeah, you would rather do something kind of fun. So it stands to reason that if you made, your sales pitch a little bit more fun, a little bit more enjoyable, people might be more engaged in it. Or if you made your own work a little bit more fun, you might be a little bit more willing to do it. And that's kind of what we're talking about. When we're talking about humor in the workplace, we're not necessarily talking about being funny.
Yeah.
That can be a component of it, but we're talking about a way of working that is kind of different, effective, and that fun piece of things. So that's kind of part of the starting point. You don't have to be, it's not about becoming a stand-up comedian, though we can learn from them. It's more about finding ways to engage people to get a specific result.
And I think it's kind of one of the most powerful ways to break the ice, bond, and build trust.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're thinking about as a salesperson, what can you gain out of using humor? One, starting with a little bit of humor up top gets people paying attention, right? A fantastic speaker named Tammy Evans, she says, if you get people laughing, then you get them listening. If you get them listening, then you get them learning. Right? So humor is a great way to grab people's attention, to get them up off of their phone or to get them out of their own heads. So you're getting people to pay attention in that way. And then, like you said, yeah, maybe use a little bit of humor so that you build rapport with someone. Victor Borg said that the shortest distance between two people is a smile. And when we laugh together, we're showing that we're kind of on the same side together, that you understand me a little bit more. So it's a great way to kind of very quickly build rapport and build trust and provide value. So I've done some coaching work with IBM and their sales team, and one of their big beliefs is that the people often buy from the first person that provides them value. And so that value could be in assessment, it could be in an education, and it also can be humor as a form of value. It's making your day a little bit more fun. And so people, like you said, it builds kind of that trust a little bit, and people are more willing to kind of lean in, listen a little bit more, and they want to give money to people that they like as opposed to someone that's dry and that they hate.
And that's it. And there's a kind of a big debate going on today in sales that likability or being liked isn't necessary. And it's like, well, nothing is not anything is absolutely necessary, but it sure is easier when you're liked than when you're disliked.
Yeah, I think so. I've certainly, given money to people just because I like, oh man, I like them. How do I like the content that you've shared. I like the way that you've engaged. How do I give you money as a result of it? Or at least I'm a little bit more likely to stay engaged. So for example, I got a cold email from someone. This was like probably a year or two ago, and I didn't respond to it. And then about a week later, I don't know if you know the John Travolta gif from Pulp Fiction, where it's his Pulp Fiction character just kind of looking around. And the guy sent me a week after I didn't respond to anything. He sent me just that gif. Of John Travolta looking around, no text or anything, but it was basically to say, hey, where's the response? Look, I'm looking around for a response. And it made me laugh. And so it made me like, I responded to the person. I didn't need what he was selling, but I at least responded to be like, hey, thanks for at least the smile and the laugh this morning. And to your, yeah, right. Is it 100% necessary? No, but as an engineer, I'm lazy, right? That's why engineers are obsessed with efficiency, because it's the laziest form of productivity. It's the least amount of work for the most amount of gain. And if something's going to help me shortcut a conversation or help me to build a better relationship long term that's going to lead to better sales or a better kind of delivery, I'm all for it.
And that's it, because I always look at things from the reptilian brain, because that's really what happens. Mm-hmm. And I think what humor does is it says that we're on the same side, that I am not here to take something from you. I'm here to give you something.
Absolutely. There's Ian Altman wrote the book Same Side Selling, and that for me changed my perspective around selling, where it's not about tricking someone into buying something. It is kind of saying, hey, this is the problem that you have. Here are the solutions that we provide. Let's see if that's a match. Let's see if we can be on the same side and solve this challenge together. And humor is a great way to show, hey, we're on the same side.
And it also solves the problem, which is kind of the second most common problem I hear today from salespeople is people aren't calling me back. They're not engaging with me. And it's because they don't need anything. Now, if they know that you're somebody who's enjoyable to talk to, regardless of whether they buy or not buy, where they are in that process or not, would they just enjoy that conversation, the catching up, the leaving or picking up the joke where it was left when you last saw them, they're much more apt to converse with you as opposed to, hey, I just wanted to see where things were.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big believer in the idea of that no feedback is feedback. And this has helped me tremendously kind of in my speaking and training career. But, the simplest example of that is, if you get a haircut and your good friends, all they say is, hey, you got a haircut. Right? That's feedback, right? If they're not like, hey, I like your haircut or that haircut looks good on you or whatever, that's feedback. And so if you are constantly talking with people that are like not responding to your messages or like, no, thanks, don't need anything, and that's like the extent of the conversation, then that is feedback that, your first couple of interactions with them probably were not anything to build any type of stronger relationship. And sure, maybe, and this is, I think, an important distinction for at least engineers to understand is that there is a difference between being efficient and being effective. Right. I remember as a project manager at P&G, I wanted to send emails that were like, do this thing. Right? Like I'm the project manager. I knew exactly what everyone kind of needed to do. So I wanted to just send out a command, right? Do this thing. But instead, we know that over time we had to send like, hey, so-and-so, I hope you had a great weekend. Anyway, I was hoping to do this thing by this date, for this reason, see you at the happy hour later. Sincerely, yours truly. Cheers, best regards, XOXO. Right? All that. Like that's a lot more typing. But because we're dealing with humans and the emotional, factor, we have to do things that are effective, not necessarily efficient. And that's where humor comes into play. That, adding a little bit of humor to a sales presentation or adding a little bit of humor, even if it's kind of a PS and kind of here's a funny video that I thought of, when we're chatting at the very end, that does take a little bit more work, but it's long-term way more effective as opposed to the short-term efficiency gain.
And that's it. And I think a lot of reps would say, well, I'm not funny. And and like a lot of things, and you talk about it as a skill. So a skill can be learned. You're not going to be Chris Rock, but you can be funnier. And I think your point about starting with the smile, and that's always been my secret weapon. When someone was mad at me, I just put on this big smile, which is really the first step to laughter.
It is. And we are primed with mirror neurons in our brain to see when we see someone smile, we are primed physiologically to want to mirror that behavior. It's been a kind of a social cue that we've had for ages. And so I think a smile is great. And I think you're exactly right on is that, to use humor in the workplace, you don't always have to be the creator. If you're still a little bit nervous or don't think that you're funny, you can start by sharing interesting things. You can start by, including images in your presentations that have a Creative Commons license, but are much more interesting than just a wall full of text. Or, as I mentioned, if you follow up, if you've had a first conversation with someone, and this is what I like to do because I love stand-up comedy. If I'm talking with someone and something comes up that reminds me of a great stand-up comedy bit that I know, I'll send them the link afterwards. I'll be like, hey, it was great chatting with you. Sometimes I'll mention in conversation. As I mentioned, I love Eddie Izzard, and his Death Star Canteen bit is hilarious. If you haven't seen it, here's a link to it. And now I'm providing humor to their day. They're more likely to want to open that email because they know that it's something that's fun as opposed to a sales pitch. And they get to laugh as a result of it. And I didn't have to create it. I was just, in that case, the shepherd or the conduit of humor.
Yeah. And I used to do that with my presentations. You would use like whatever the funniest movie was as an exaggeration of the situation, Austin Powers or Seinfeld. And all of a sudden people would be like, oh, that was my favorite movie. That was a riot. And the rapport just starts to go, and all of a sudden you are on the same side, and the conversation just gets much more open and trustworthy.
Yeah, and it's also a great way to, in that specific example, it's a great way to get people to remember things longer, to understand things, right? Because we learn by connecting to what we already know. For example, do you know what a euphonium is?
I do not know.
Okay, so I could say a euphonium is a series of brass alloys. It's bent into various shapes. It has valves on it. You blow into it, it makes noise. Or I could say euphonium is a small tuba, right?
Yeah.
And because you know what a tuba is, you instantly understand what a euphonium is, at least at a high level. And so when we're explaining something complex, we can use association to things that people already know. And when we make that association something a little bit more fun, like say connecting it to pop culture, then not only do they remember it more, not only does it stand out, but they're able to understand it better. For example, I was at a show here in New York City not too long ago, and a woman, she was an astrophysicist, and she was explaining astrophysics using sci-fi movies. Or more accurately, she was ruining sci-fi movies because she was talking about Star Wars, and she's like, listen, there are no explosions because there is no oxygen in space. It's not physically, physics says that we can't actually create a lightsaber, and, the Force isn't real. Which I was like, all right, that's too far, Space Lady. But, right, she was explaining these complex ideas, connecting it to Star Wars, which everyone knows, and now they're more likely to remember it, and the whole time you're more likely to be engaged because you're like, oh, I don't know if I care about all these different facts about space. It's kind of interesting, but telling me how it relates to Star Wars, now I'm on board.
And I love that. And people say, well, that might be a little unprofessional or something. But then I think like when Steve Jobs did the iPhone announcement, I'm not sure if you remember it or not, where he said it's a phone, an internet device, and a music player. So what he did is he put a phone, an iPad, or an iPod, and a browser all together on the screen, and everyone roared because it was like this weird combination of it instead of the iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. And Steve Jobs was great at helping people understand, right? It's a huge, kind of component of benefits over features. That the reason why the iPod partially was successful, in addition to the UI, over say the Zune or the MP3 players that already existed at that time, was because it wasn't, hey, here's a hard drive that's 1 gig. It was, here's 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? It's speaking to the benefits, and humor can help do that. And I think that's kind of an important distinction to recognize, is that humor isn't what you do, right? It's not going to replace the work of what you're doing. It's more just about how you do it, right? You're already going to go through this sales pitch anyway. You might as well add a little bit more fun to it. You're already going to have to send this follow-up email, so you might as well add a little bit of something different into it.
And when you go into an account, how do you get people to start to learn how humor works and how to apply it?
Well, I think, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is, as we talked about, is again that humor is more broad than comedy. What we're talking about here is not, like you said, trying to become a stand-up comedian, right? It's about trying to get better results using this specific tool of humor. The other thing, and probably the big kind of component of what we teach, is what we call our humor map. And your humor map stands for your medium, your audience, and your purpose. So when you're thinking about the humor that you want to use, you want to keep in mind or understand those three things. So your medium is, how are you going to execute the humor? Is it in an email? Is it in a phone call? Is it in, Slack, in a Slack channel, whatever it is? Because your medium impacts your message, right? You know that if you say something kind of sarcastic to someone in conversation, that's a lot easier to read than, someone sending it to you via text, and you're like, why is this person so angry or so upset with me, right? So your medium impacts the message. The second piece is your audience. And the audience one is, what is your relationship to them? If it's someone that you're first meeting, the humor that you use might be a little bit more tame or a little bit more generic and open than, say, someone that you've known for 10 years and maybe you banter kind of back and forth a little bit. And also with that, you want to know, what does the audience need and what do they expect? Because when you're using humor, you want to still deliver against what they need, but maybe you do it in a way that they don't quite expect. That's what creates some of the surprise and creates some of the humor. And then the last piece is the purpose, and the purpose is, why are you going to use humor? As an engineer, I'm not someone like, let's all use humor just for the sake of humor, and, work should be fun, and we should all love everything. And it's like, no, that's a side benefit to using humor sometimes, but it's more about, how do you use humor to get a specific result? How do you use humor to say, get people to actually open the email when I send it? Or how do I use humor as a way to actually, help people remember things longer, like we talked about before?
And that's it. In sales, I think there's a lot of purposes for it. One is to build rapport, to very quickly get people to open up and relax. I've seen so many stiff sales presentations, and nobody is asking questions, nobody's engaged, people are reading their emails. So it helps there. And I think the communication mechanism, like you remember a picture better, and if the picture is funny, I think you're going to remember it a whole lot better. And if the picture's funny, you don't have to be funny.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to incorporate humor into your presentations pretty quickly, is let the slides do the punchlines for you, and then make an analogy to it. There's a great picture, and this won't do it justice because it's explaining it verbally, but there's a picture of a dog sled, like a winter dog sled, like in Alaska, but in the middle of it is a wiener dog.
Yeah.
It's a dachshund, and the text above it says, "Are you in the wrong job?" And that's, it's a great image, and I share it in my presentations as an example of, like, this is something that's going to get you to pay attention, and you immediately kind of recognize or understand what's going on in that picture. Like, oh yeah, right, not every dog is suited for every single task, and you can make an easy analogy to that. And I think that's one of the key pieces, that sometimes people here use humor and they're like, okay, so I'm going to start my presentation with a joke. They, look for some one-liner on the internet. They make a joke. That joke has nothing to do with their sales presentation. And then the, remaining 59 minutes and 30 seconds of the presentation is terribly boring. Right. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about humor in the workplace. Instead, if you started with, say, a short story, and that story related to or led into kind of the thesis or the theme, or was an example of the day, and it had humor in that story is going to get people to pay attention. And then two, when they remember, like, oh yeah, he started with that story, what was that related to? Oh, right, that's why, say in the background of, that's why he started the company and how he helps people in this way, or why she does this particular, like, suggests this particular solution because it helped in these places, right? You're using humor to help you get a specific goal.
And I don't think it's that hard, because my little hack is I'd go on to Google and I take a topic and then I space parody, humor, funny, and then hit the image tab, and there's almost always something there. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. You can also do, if you go to Flickr.com, you can change the Creative Commons license so that you can look at, ones that are open to use, and you can just type in whatever your theme is, and you're going to see a lot more interesting pictures, right? Because you don't, like, some people go the stock image route, but that almost becomes cliche now. But if you go to, like, Flickr or some of these other sites, you'll find really interesting, compelling pictures that you can then use and then speak to. And you kind of do a lot of public speaking. Now, you got to admit that it's super powerful versus the people who might have a brilliant idea or insight or approach that are stiff.
Oh, it's amazing, the difference. I mean, there's a cliche within the speaking industry that, says, do you have to be funny as a speaker? And the answer is only if you want to get paid. Right? It doesn't matter how smart you are if people are falling asleep when you start talking, or if they can't understand what you're talking about. And it's one of those things, right? Like we talked about, people want to have fun. So I've noticed that, a lot of times I'll be the closing keynote speaker at conferences because it's a little bit lighter. It's a fun way to end things. But it's when energy is low. And so I sometimes, when I'm stepping on stage, people are still in their phones a little bit. They're distracted. And then I start with some humor up top, and the people around them start laughing, and you can kind of visibly see it. People look up, and they're like, wait, why is that person laughing? I want to laugh. I want to have a good time. I better pay attention to what this person is talking about now.
And what is the process you go through if you're giving a new talk to a new audience?
Yeah, so I start again first with, okay, what is the message? What do I need to get across?
Yeah.
Because again, humor isn't what, it's kind of how. So it's starting with that purpose piece and understanding it. And then as I have my kind of key points that I'm driving towards, I'm like, okay, how can I share that in a more interesting way? Can I use an association? Can I use some incongruity up top? How could a story help me here? And I'm somewhat strategic about it in that I know, research has shown that one of the rhythms that we have have, we have a circadian rhythm of our sleep, but we also have an attention rhythm. And the average person can kind of pay attention to one kind of cohesive topic for 7 to 10 minutes, which means as presenters, every 7 to 10 minutes, we, if not sooner, we want some type of change, right? Whether it is, okay, now I'm going to go into a story, or now I'm going to do a quick activity. I'm going to have them answer a question, or I'm going to have them do some type of, they're going to give me questions that they have, or I'm going to ask a question of the audience, right? Something different every 7 to 10 minutes to share. And so I'm like, okay, if I don't have anything in this 7 to 10 minutes, what type of humor can I use? How can I approach it? How can I go back to that humor map and start to develop humor ideas?
So you just break it down into those elements, and I think it's a pretty easy process, isn't it? Or
I think so. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's does it require some work? Absolutely. Are you going to immediately know, oh, isn't a story immediately going to come to mind that you need? No, it'll take a little bit of time. But that's the other thing that I do is it's always an iterative approach. It's always, I'm always tweaking things, just like software development, just like tweaking your sales speech. I see that as an opportunity to learn more, to gather some data of like, okay, this story works really well, but if I add this tag, or if I tell a different story and put it in a different order, does that work better? Right? And we do this, my thought is we're going to do these things anyway. You might as well have a little bit of fun with it. And that's one of the other benefits of humor, is that it can make your own work more fun. Right? If you're going to a networking event, you're like, oh my God, I got to talk to so many people again. And if you're an introvert like me, you've like you're going to be drained by talking with people. And I turn it into a game where I'm like, okay, let me tweak my own story. When people ask me, what do I do? Let me tweak my response and see what I get. And over time, I've learned, if I'm talking to salespeople or marketing people and they ask what you do, sometimes I'll answer like, oh, well, I teach engineers how to be more human. And they'll laugh a little bit, and then they'll be like, how do you do that? So then I'll explain the value of humor and some improv stuff that we do. And what I thought in the past was I thought that would limit my market, because when I first started out, I was working with engineers on communication skills, leadership skills. But what I found is people would be like, oh, wait, if you can do that for engineers, can you also do it for sales? Can you do it for marketing? And it's like, absolutely, there's going to be some tweaks to it, but I can. Right? But that kind of answer came about of me trying it. I've also learned, because of tweaking things, that answer doesn't work as well with engineers. They don't realize that I'm an engineer as well, and they sometimes take offense to that. So instead, when I'm talking to engineers, I tell them that, oh, well, we help people, learn the business skills they need to go along with the technical skills they have. So engineers are like, oh, well, yeah, I've definitely got the technical sales down, but man, humans are difficult. Oh, okay, that changes the conversation. That's all been an iterative approach where I try to have a little bit of fun each time I do it.
And that's it, because I think in the last 5 years we've all been taught in sales is to come up with a great insight, something that they don't know about. That's good if you have one and they care about it. But if you can't really have rapport with them, if you can't really connect with them and have them open up, what do you really have? They're not really going to talk to you again unless they need something. And I talk with marketing people all the time, and I go, because infotainment is the thing. You're trying to bring content, but if it's not entertaining, and entertaining is either super engaging or funny. Mm-hmm. And, I've been doing videos now for about a year, and I did it 100% at the beginning about insightful, giving people great ideas to help them sell more. And I got like 5,000 views. And I go, well, I love to joke around. And I moved to comedy. And I did little parodies and stories pretending I'm talking on the phone while I'm walking. Mm-hmm. And 10x, 20x the type of engagement.
Yeah, right? Because again, people want to have, a little bit more fun. Like Seinfeld says, he's like, there's no such thing as an attention span, only boring content, right? And you see that with binge watching things. People are like, oh, I'm so busy, right? So busy, I don't have time for anything. Even people are like, I don't watch TV. And they're like, but I did watch, all of Stranger Things season 3 when it first came out.
Yeah,
right?
I watched all weekend.
Yep, exactly. People, if it's engaging content, they're willing to jump into it, right? And for me, again, it's just going back into how do humans work? Right, because we don't have robot overlords as of yet, anyway, and so we have to understand how do human work, how do humans work, and humor works with people. It's a way to get, kind of a shortcut to getting their attention or getting them to take action.
And the other thing I noticed about it was the haters almost went away. It went from like probably 20% to about 1%. People who would just disagree or misinterpret or just troll on it, because it just doesn't make sense to hate on comedy.
No, and you recognize, like, your humor is not going to appeal to every 100% of the world, right? So, for example, I have a TEDx talk on the skill of humor, and I've been fortunate that it's done pretty well. It's at about 5 million views right now. It's got 80,000 comments on, or 80,000 likes on it, and 2,000 dislikes, or whatever the percentage is. So it's not going to be perfect for everyone, but just as in a sales process, your goal is not to have a message that fits everyone. Your goal is to have a message that fits your target audience, that fits the target buyer, to fit the people that you can actually serve and provide value to. And so the goal isn't, again, to be the funny person with the Netflix comedy special, but to use humor in these instances that at least build a little bit more of a connection with, the person you're trying to work with.
Cool. Hey, this has been a fun conversation. Where can people go to connect with you and get your book?
Sure, yeah. If they want to learn more about humor in the workplace, they can go to humorthatworks.com. We've got plenty of free kind of blog articles on there, a free newsletter they can sign up for, also information on the book and an online course that we have, information on our workshops and things that we do as well. If they want to connect with me personally, if they love puns, so one of the things that my style of humor is I love puns, so I tweet, a pun almost every day. So if you love that kind of stuff, you can follow me on social media at Drew Tarvin, DREWTAR. V as in Victor, I-N. That's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I recently discovered I still have a MySpace page. So if you're on MySpace still, then myspace.com/Drew Tarvin.
I hope that'll be the start of a humorous career in sales. So how do you start? Just put a big smile on and pretend that you are laughing. Laugh inside. And it helps break tension. It helps get onto the same page. It helps opening people up and building rapport. Let me give you a story. I had this manager who just hated me at this company. He was trying to horn into this huge account and deal that I was working on, and was trying to take the revenue out of the deal and just have it be a showcase account for the company. Now, that was okay. It was great for him, okay for the company, and terrible for me, because I did all the work and he could just come in and get them deployed and just accelerate it by taking the revenue out of it. And the company could put a logo on the web page and I would get 0 commission. Well, that wasn't going to fly. I had put a year into this deal. It was a multi-7-figure deal. I wasn't letting it go. It was, a house in commission for me. So he came down and he was visiting us and them, and I kind of told the CEO he's not allowed into the account. I will not bring him into the account. So he came in to my office all mad, and I get up and I put this huge smile on where I in my mind, I said, how would I greet my best friend, somebody I hadn't seen in a long time? And I put this big smile on and a little bit of a giggle or a laugh. And he looked at me and he automatically smiled. And he goes, Brian, I don't know what it is about you. You're just a hard person to be mad at. And it was disarming. Now, I didn't say a word. I didn't crack a joke. And is that humor? I don't know. But what it is it's a way of building rapport instantly, because it's very hard to be mad at somebody who's got a big warm smile on. But the smile is the first trigger into humor. Now, if you're not funny, all you can do is find a funny image to put into your presentation, an exaggeration maybe of what you do on either the upside or the downside of it. Watch how Steve Jobs did it with the introduction of the iPhone, where he goes, it's an iPod, internet device, and a phone. And he just merged the 3 images together. And it was funny. Everybody knew he wasn't serious. It was It was semi-professional. It wasn't amateurish or childish, but it was insanely effective because now you had everybody in the palm of your hand. It gets you away from being this stiff shirt. Now, let's use it in the way that I had intended for this interview. If you become known to your client as somebody who's enjoyable to talk to, at whatever level that is. Some people use sports. I've used humor or find some commonality that the person cares about. And what humor does is they get to tell you, oh, what was your favorite movie? Who's your favorite comedian? And you get to hear it. And all of a sudden you share clips about it. It becomes that third thing that you can talk about. And if I get a voicemail or I see somebody calling that I know isn't going to hound me, but will, hear me out and maybe tell me a funny story, I'll pick it up. Somebody who's enjoyable to talk to. Now that's their opinion, not mine. Okay, and that's what it is in sales. We have to be able to be that person. Because if they see your number or they see your email and they know you're checking in on the deal, you're hounding them to take action. And we have to. And in the course, I show you how to prevent this. But if you're unwilling or I'm too good for the class or you can't afford to double your income or you don't want to be really good, you're happy being mediocre, don't worry about it. Just a little humor there. Being enjoyable to talk to will enable you to keep that ball moving. Keep the open communication. Because in these rigid, step-by-step opportunities, the negotiation, they're not going to be open and sharing what's really going on, what the real issue is at their company, what the obstacle really is. And you're just going to think, oh, it's just time, it's going to happen. And what ends up happening, it gets put on what I call the pile of great ideas. We all have them in our head of what we'd like to spend our time and money on, the places we'd like to go, the things we would like to buy, the things we'd spend our time and money on. It's a pile of good ideas, but we only do a small percentage of them. That's where we live as salespeople. We're on that pile of good ideas. It's not that they can't afford it. It's not that they don't want it. It's not that they won't benefit from it. It's just on that list, and it's not on the top. We have to figure out a way of getting on top. And communicating with them is essential. And if they don't enjoy communicating with you, or they see you just as a rep, you're in the rep zone, they're only going to talk to you when they want or need something. So if you want to learn how to really use not just humor, but understand how to keep that ball moving and how to keep the communication line open, well, then go to b2brevenue.com, sign up for a course, schedule a time to talk with me. Just hit the training tab, either pick a time or check out the courses. The prices are going up August 1st, so you might want to act now because the summer is the perfect time to get started on these things. Because guess what? I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of people go on vacation during the summer, and a lot of those people are your prospects and customers. And which slows things down and makes it hard to keep that momentum going. So it's a good time to learn new skills. Get your game out of your head and onto something that you can look at and become better at. And first recognize that it isn't just a bunch of tactics strung together. You're playing a game whether you admit it or not. And if you want to win the game, you first have to understand what the game is, and then find out how the people who win the game do it. And that's what the course is all about. So the people who are taking it are crushing it, going to make this year the best year ever. That's it. Please check out the other podcasts. If you have sales questions, I got brutally honest answers. I'm warning you, they're brutally honest. I'm not holding back. I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you how I see it, and I cut through a lot of these people on LinkedIn and YouTube who have never sold. I listened to some of the podcasts. There's nobody else out there who's a real salesperson, who's really sold for more than one company or their mommy or they're in business development and failing, or they sold for 2 years and got fired, or a sales leader who got fired and now is trying to teach other sales leaders how not to get fired. If you want to learn how to crush your number and make real commissions, get up into the 500K range, sign up for the course. What it includes is 100% access to all the content day one. You consume it at the rate you want to. You want to rush through it, rush through it. You want to take your time, take your time. Then you got 2 other opportunities. You can email as many times as you want. I answer them in office hours, which is every other Friday meetup. And there you get to ask questions, talk through issues, hear what other people are doing. And they're all recorded and put into the course. So we got 1.5 years of those in there. Also, unlimited one-on-ones. We apply the course to the exact accounts that you want to close. We sit down and talk through them. All recorded, put back in the course. Unlimited. And so you get to hear other people. How are they solving this particular problem? And what typically you find is, as a rep, we all are in the fog of war. We're not seeing what we should be seeing because we're too close to it. We're emotionally attached to it. We're financially attached to it. What we need is somebody to help us take a step back, ask us some of the tough questions that we should be asking but aren't, and put together a strategy to win the deal. And it's all about you. That's what the course is. And it compounds. With each student, it becomes better. Better questions, more questions, different markets, different tool sets. So the community is turning it into a snowball. We're learning about new products, new techniques. And these things are coming out. It's not all me. It's some of the best tips in the last week have come from students. And they all get put in. And everybody else gets to benefit from it. So go to b2brevenue.com and check it out. Also, follow me on LinkedIn. And if you like YouTube, check it out. Brian Burns Sales on YouTube, where the channel is called Maverick Method, all one word. We'll see you next time.